Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the pre-show for the April 2026 Coffee and Real Estate Live Chat. Just kicking things off, making sure everything's working. We are good on YouTube. I'm getting audio. Well, hello. See, there's the proof. You heard it. We are live on X. Yes, we are. We are live on LinkedIn, or should be. LinkedIn's always weird. Everyone, and welcome to the pre-show. There we go. That's going. And I added Instagram this time. And I don't know. This is the first time I've tried doing Instagram, and I kind of just did it off the cuff here. So we'll see if it actually works. I am not seeing it. So that's why I didn't advertise it. I figured I'd just give it a go and see if it worked. Nope, I don't see it. It doesn't seem to be happening. Or maybe it's because maybe it's only visible on mobile? Maybe. I don't know. Ping me in the chat if it's working. Let's see. All right. Welcome, everyone. Here we are, April 18th, 2026. We've got just about 12 minutes till the show is going to start officially. For those of you who are hearing a buzzing in the background, I apologize. My speaker setup, for whatever reason, has started buzzing, and I have yet to go through and isolate all the cables and see who's interfering with who. So I'm going to turn off that. I'm going to turn off the speakers. I could, I guess, go with headphones, but I just I feel constricted when that's happening. As some of you might remember from last time, my dad died recently. It was a little actually just before the last live chat. So for me personally, life has kind of taken a little bit of a turn. I've always thought, you take life's big things and you just take them and move forward, right? You work through them, or you embrace them. Like if it's a good thing, and you still embrace if it's a bad thing, and just sort of emotionally digest it. And I've had a much harder time with this than I would have expected from myself, I guess. My dad was a great guy. He was in his 90s when he passed, and everyone was around him. So if you're trying to imagine what the perfect way would be to die, I think I would choose the way he went. Everyone who loved him was around him. He had an opportunity to have an intimate conversation with all of his closest relatives literally the day before he went. But a man moving forward without him and trying to kind of help my mom has been hard. I think that for those of you who have been at the side of a loved one when they've died, sometimes those last words can cut. Not because they're saying something mean to you, but they're saying, please make it stop, or please help me. And I honestly thought I had a built-in defense mechanism for that stuff. I've probably seen more people die than most people have seen die. I think I've mentioned before, and I think it's even on my profile, but I was an EMT for quite a while in the 90s. Along with also I was doing real estate at the same time, but I saw an awful lot of people die, and I saw horrible examples of ways I would never want to die. I saw very, very beautiful ways that people passed on. So I thought I because of that experience that I'd be immune to a lot of the things that I think cause people to sort of step out of their life for a while. But I haven't taken on any new clients since my dad passed away. I had a couple of clients that I worked through, and I've really just sort of taken it as a time to sort of sit back and reflect. And I don't think that's unhealthy, but it's definitely something that maybe you don't expect. And I don't know where I'm going with this. This is just the 15 minutes before we talk about real estate, but it puts into perspective what life is about. You know, I've mentioned before that one of my biggest mentors was my grandfather, and he was a real estate agent like no other. I mean, he was, and he's the reason why I got into real estate originally, and primarily because he did things so ethically, so correctly, wanted so much to add value to every experience he had in anything he did, whether it was real estate or anything else, whether he was going to the supermarket to buy eggs or helping someone find the right property or sell their home. He was all in, and I've always tried to emulate that, and I feel like I've done at least a good job of that. That's one of those things I'm not sure you can judge for yourself. I mean, it's about having conversations with the people you're working with to make sure that you're giving them what they need in order to make the process work out for them as they hope. And those conversations have gone well in terms of folks I've talked to, but my dad was the same way. What's funny is he got into real estate after me. So my grandfather was in real estate. I got into real estate because of my grandfather. And then my father got into real estate after I did, but to the tune of maybe maybe 10 years. I guess I was in it 10 years before he jumped in. But and everyone loved the guy, you know, and as someone who's now on the living side of the life-death equation, you start thinking about, well, if you go, how do you want to be remembered? I mean, and what is it that you want? What do you want your legacy to be when you're gone? Is the power come from just being remembered and being remembered well? Just think well of me, you know, after I'm gone. So I'm, you know, maybe you guys have the answer. Maybe you guys know the answer to this question and I'm just an idiot. But I've gone back to reading a lot. I've always been sort of a philosophy guy, kind of a stoic philosophy kind of guy. So I've been going back and rereading some stuff I read when I was a little younger, and with the new context of the experience that I've had with this, and it's been hard, but I think it's been healthy. I don't know. Anyway, so what else is going on? A very interesting contradiction in one of the news articles we're going to talk about today from a source that frequently I have issues with. It is Redfin, right? Isn't that who this one came from? Yes. I don't get where they're getting the numbers, and it's not just me. I've got a third party that's also reporting very different numbers from what Redfin seems to think is going on. So I don't know. They may be cherry picking a segment, but we'll talk about that after we go through the big numbers for the month. I hope you all have your favorite brew. I know I do. I've taken on a lot of DIY stuff in the house, and I'm also toying with bringing back the facial fuzz. I don't know, for those of you who've been with me for a while, know that there was quite a few years there where I sported a pretty decent beard. And now as I grow it back in again and I see how much white there is in it, I'm just not sure am I vain enough to color it? I may be. I might be vain enough to color it, but we'll see. So we are just 4 or 5 minutes away, 4.5 minutes from kicking off the show for real. For those of you who have joined me for the pre-show, I see, where's the number that tells me how many? Right now, there's nobody. Okay, I know there was one there a minute ago, but welcome to it. And if you're on Instagram, reach out. Let me know. Let me know if this is happening on Instagram or not. Is there a place I can look here? Let me see channels. It says it's streaming to Instagram. I don't have Instagram open. But if you see me on Instagram and you're on Instagram, go ahead and message me and I'll see that eventually. So I'm guessing everything is as it should be on Instagram. Let's see what else. Do we have any are there any big shockers? I don't know if we have any big, other than this weird data that we have from Redfin. I'm not real sure there's anything crazy out there. One thing, and actually I'm always apologizing for this. I got to stop doing that. But I did a podcast about a month ago, and I've had one in the can ready to go. I've had my outline, all my data, and all the stuff, and double checking to make sure I was right. But what's most interesting about that maybe is the anecdotal part. I've had several clients who've reached out to me, and this has almost never happened before. So this is something California is doing now to those who have escaped the state. I've had clients who've moved to Utah, Florida, Texas, and Nevada reach out to me and say that the state has sent them a letter claiming that they owe money to the state. They owe money to California based on them saying that you didn't leave at this date or that date. So the importance of making sure that's documented right now is crazy. And here's the nuts part. I think the furthest back, and this is someone who reached out to me, I think middle of last year, because they wanted me to provide all the close of escrow stuff and all that. So I did. I just sent them all the PDFs of all that stuff. California was claiming that they had been here long, that they stayed to the end of the year or whatever it is. But their escrow had closed 5 years earlier. They'd been out of the state for 5 years. And so California, I think, is upping their attempts to extract money from folks who've moved away. We know they're trying to create an exit tax. In my personal opinion, I don't think that passes a federal review of what's constitutional. And I don't know what basis you could do it on. Maybe the interstate commerce clause. I mean, you can't keep people prisoner in your state by levying a fee on them leaving. I tell you what, if you want me to pay you a fee, then why don't you give me back all the taxes I've paid since I've been here? That'd be perfectly fine with me. But yeah, so California is definitely leaning into that. I don't know. Let me know if your state's doing it. But California is definitely doing it. I wouldn't be surprised if we were to do a review of what's going on with the state of California. We find that a ton more people have been hired in whatever department does this, in the California Department of Tax Collection. So if you're someone who has left the state, don't be surprised if 5 to 7 years from now you get pinged by the state saying that you owe money. So the bottom line is, and this in the podcast I'm going to do on this subject, I'm going to lay out all the steps that you need to take, the things you need to keep in order to get the state off of your back, because they will come for you. What's interesting is most of the folks who I have had reach out to me, and I'm sure, if 5 people reach out to me over that period of time, say 150 people that I've helped buy or sell a home, or that I've helped sell a home, right? Because these would be all these sellers. You got to figure there's a ton that didn't. So if let's just round it down and say 5%, what percent of people had it happen to them who didn't need to reach out to me for whatever reason? So that's a pretty good number of folks getting chased. But the folks who reached out to me were in higher income brackets in terms of, how much they made per year. So maybe that had something to do with it. Okay, here we are. Welcome to it. It is now 10 o'clock in the morning on April 18th, 2026. And assuming that you didn't click here by accident, you know that today is the Coffee and Real Estate live chat that I do every month to discuss the big numbers. To introduce myself, my name is Robert Whitelaw. I'm a licensed real estate broker in the state of California, a member of the Association of Realtors. I've been working in Silicon Valley in the wide, wonderful world of real estate since 1988, which just doesn't feel like it was that long ago, but boy, was it ever. Seen all kinds of markets come and go, but I've been helping people achieve their buying, selling, and investing real estate goals for a very long time. And I would love to be on the list of agents you will be willing to talk to about achieving your goals when the time comes. So if you'd like to do that, feel free to reach out to me. My website is at soldbyrobert.com. And I look forward to hearing from those of you who would like my help, or at least like to hear what I believe I bring to the table when it comes to achieving your goals. And as we always do on this monthly excursion into the world of real estate, we're going to talk about the big numbers first, and then we'll talk about some news items and try to look at them with a critical eye, add some common sense, and see if we can't figure out where things are going. And that's really what this is about. It's about looking at data and trying to interpret it. And trying to interpret those moments when someone's trying to sell us an idea that maybe isn't really what you should be coming to the conclusion of relating to some piece of data. So let's go ahead and jump in. I'm going to kick us into the prezo part. Let me move my head because who needs to see that over the numbers? There we go. So we're looking at March of 2026, and the numbers we're looking at first here are the total homes on the market. So to put that into the context of your experience as a buyer or seller, what that represents is, as a seller, this is your competition. How many other homes are there out there that are trying to get the attention of buyers to get that home sold? For buyers, it's the number of products on the shelf for you. How much choice do you have, right? And it's a great way to understand how much pressure is on you. And we'll get to a number here in a bit in terms of months of inventory. That also gives us some insight to that. But for now, let's just jump in and look at the numbers. Welcome. I see someone just joined us. Glad to see you with us. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. I'll be happy to answer any questions on the fly as we go. If I don't reply immediately, don't run away. I just haven't seen it yet. The chat stuff is all over there, and the data stuff is all over there. So if I'm focused on the data, I'm not going to notice your chat right off, or your comment right off the bat. So I will apologize in advance for that. Okay, so Santa Clara County. Overall inventory was up 17% in Santa Clara County. And remember, this is year over year. So this is March of 2025 versus March of 2026. And we can see that last year, in March of 2025, we had 1,830 homes on the market in the month of March, and 2,135 homes on the market in March of 2026. So that is where we get our 17% increase. San Jose, we had a 31% increase. 800 homes last year were on the market in March of 2025. This year, 1,051 in March of 2026. Let's see, we just got someone else joining. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Next, Morgan Hill. Total homes on the market in Morgan Hill in March of 2025 was 86, up 15% to 99 in March of 2026. In Gilroy, we had an actual decline. We had a number of homes on market go down. There were 94 homes in March of 2025 and 88 homes in March of 2026 for a 6% reduction in the number of homes. Next, let's take a look at the total number of new listings. New listings just means exactly that. How many homes came on the market in the month of March? And we can see that from these numbers, we've got increases across the board. And we'll do a comparison here to see, once we see homes sold, did we sell more homes than we listed, or did we list more homes than we sold? So for right now in Santa Clara County, we saw a 9% increase in the total number of homes listed when compared to March of 2025. So 1,814 homes were listed in March of 2025. In March of 2026, 1,983 homes were listed. In San Jose, that number was up 16%, 825 homes in March of 2025, and then 961 homes in March of 2026. In Morgan Hill, we saw a 21% increase. 68 homes were listed in March of 2025, 82 listed in March of 2026. And finally, Gilroy, a 16% increase with 63 homes listed in March of 2025 and 73 homes listed in March of 2026. Now, the final number here that'll give us a little bit more insight into some of the activity is going to be the total number of homes that sold. And for Santa Clara County in March of 2025, we had 1,005 homes that sold. In Santa Clara County, that increased 4% to 1,044, almost a wash. I mean, very similar numbers. I mean, given the fact we've seen an increase in listings and all those in the double digits, it's interesting to see that we saw such a mild number of homes sold, right? So that obviously impacts the overall accumulation of properties, which then tends to bring prices down. But we'll talk more about that in a minute. In San Jose, it only went up 2%. 497 homes in March of 2025, 506 homes in March of 2026. In Morgan Hill, we saw a 35% increase. 34 homes sold in March of 2025 and March of 2026. That jumped up to 46 homes. And in Gilroy, it's down 7%, 28 homes in March of 2025 and 26 homes in March of 2026. Now, the sample size is small enough in Morgan Hill and Gilroy that we really don't want to make broad conclusions based on these. So for the purposes of Gilroy, I'd call it a wash. I'd say we basically sold the same number of homes as last year. And then in Morgan Hill, definitely an uptick. My personal experience on the ground is that there is elevated interest on the part of buyers in Morgan Hill. And I think some of that may have to do with folks who feel outpriced in parts of San Jose or areas north of Morgan Hill. And the anecdotal conversations I've had with folks doing their shopping tends to bear that out. So that seems to explain it. Now, if we take this and we compare it to homes sold versus new listings, we can see that in Santa Clara County overall, we listed 1,983, right? But we only sold 1,044. So that's a 939 home increase to the overall inventory. And we increased inventory across the board in all these communities. In San Jose, it was increased by 455. In Morgan Hill, it was increased by 36. And in Gilroy, it was increased by 47. So in every case, we just added, excuse me, to the total number of homes on the market in our local markets. Okay, no questions on that. Let's go ahead and jump to the next one. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about months of inventory. And the idea here is that for the month of March, we freeze the total number of homes sold and we freeze the total inventory. And how long would it take for those sold numbers to bring the inventory numbers down to zero, right? If those two numbers just stayed the same every month, how long would it take to make a market of zero homes? And in Santa Clara County, the total amount of time is up 11%. But last year in 2025, in March, it would have been 1.8 months to sell off all the homes that were on the market. This year, March of 2026, it's 2 months. In San Jose, up 31%, 1.6 months in March of 2025. And then in March of 2026, it's up to 2.1 months. Morgan Hill down 12%, which is interesting. 2.5 months last year, 2.2 months this year in March of 2026. And then in Gilroy, it's the same. It's a wash, 3.4, 3.4. Now, to put this into a little bit better context for you, nationally, the balanced market in terms of months of inventory is considered 4 to 4.5 months. Obviously, the community closest to that is Gilroy, and this just gives you an idea of the balance, right? So if we had 5 months, then it would suddenly be a buyer's market, right? Because we simply have too many homes and too few sales to support the total inventory. So when you have higher demand, higher supply and less demand, prices tend to come down. So that's why we track this. This is why it's worth your time to get a feeling for this. So this tells us that across the board, we're still in a seller's market, despite many other numbers that we're going to look at that show that things are in a flattening state, but not in a huge growth state. Okay. Next, let's talk about the total number of homes pending or contingent. And what that means is an offer was accepted. So you accepted an offer and it would have immediately gone, in most cases, contingent. Are there offers where there are no contingencies and immediately goes to pending? Sure. But for right now, we're focusing on this. And the reason why we focus on it is it gives us an insight into, are we seeing a big jump in both the yearly and month-over-month numbers, which would indicate we're going to see a jump in the number of homes that sell in the following month, because this would be a leading indicator, right? If you've accepted an offer today, you're not likely to close escrow till at least 30 to 45 days after that acceptance. So it's a way of kind of telling the future a little bit on what we can expect to see next month as it relates to total number of homes sold. Okay. So in Santa Clara County last year, in March of 2025, we had 1,151 homes that went pending or contingent, and we had 1,178 that went pending in March of 2026 for a 2% increase. In San Jose, the number dropped. 558 homes last year in March of 2025, and then in March of 2026, we saw 551 homes for a 1% drop. Morgan Hill also down. 44 homes went pending in March of 2025. And in March of 2026, we saw that go down to 43, which is a 2% drop. But again, because of sample size, call it a wash. There's a little bit less. The margin of error grows, right, as you get a smaller sample size. So we can call that a wash. Gilroy, though, there's a big enough delta here between last year and this year that I'm not going to call that an effect of small sample size. We've got 31 homes that went pending in March of 2025. 52 homes went pending in March of 2026. So that's a 68% jump. So a lot more activity on the part of buyers. I think that very clearly what we're seeing is folks shifting some of their interest to Gilroy because it's a better affordability proposition for an awful lot of folks. You can get the home that would cost you $2 million in San Jose might cost you 1.4 in Gilroy. Does it increase your commute time? Yeah, probably, depending on where you work. But a lot of folks are willing to take on that extra 15, 20-minute commute because they don't want to pay those huge prices. Okay, taking a look at if we've got any new folks. It looks like we've got a couple of folks in there. I don't know if anybody has switched seats, but if you've got any questions, please feel free to ask them in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer them as soon as I see them. So moving right along. Average original list price. Original list price is not something I see anyone else really reporting, but I think it has a great value. It calibrates you to the expectations of the sellers at the time they listed their home for sale, because what this represents is what the price for the home was when it was entered into the multiple listing service. So that day it went on the market, the agent and the homeowner agreed this is the number that we want to put out there. This is our number we want. And in Santa Clara County, and keep in mind, historically, this measurement of expectations on the part of sellers has in many cases been a double digit, meaning over 10% increases, right? Big increases in the past. Hasn't been that way now for about 6 months. But what we're seeing now is a 3.1% increase in Santa Clara County overall. $2,012,369 in March of 2025 was the average aspired sales price. And then in March of 2026, that number jumped to $2,074,007. In San Jose, it's up 5.3%, $1,468,301. Up 5.3%, as I said, in March of 2026 to $1,546,370. Morgan Hill up 3.9%. March of 2025, $1,595,770. And in March of 2026, that was up to $1,657,978. And finally, in Gilroy, which was also up 3.2%, $1,424,259 in March of 2025, up to $1,470,287 in March of 2026. So still expectations rising year over year, but more in a reasonable bracket. Unlike for those of you who've been joining me for these for a while now, you'll know that we've definitely had some years where seller expectations in some markets was just insane. Morgan Hill has been a historical market where sellers' expectations were often way out of whack, given what the market was doing as far as sales prices. But that's where we go next. Next is average sales price. And we can see across the board, they're not up. The average sales price across the board is down. In Santa Clara County, obviously largest sample size, so the lowest statistical deviation, right, at the end there. $2,108,979 was March of 2025. In March of 2026, that dropped down to $2,053,487 for a 2.6% drop. You know what? Let me check something real quick. I'm almost sure I did this, but okay, yeah. I have had a momentary horror dream of not having clicked start video on Facebook. Because I did that once, and it was upsetting. All right, San Jose, 0.5% increase, excuse me, so that there was, I'm sorry, that was the one community that went up a little bit. But when we look at how much it went up, really kind of a wash. $1,585,198 in March of 2025. In March of 2026, that went to $1,592,551. In Morgan Hill, down 0.9%, so almost 1%, $1,433,748 in March of 2025. And then in March of 2026, we see $1,421,053. And in Gilroy, we see the biggest drop, 7%. March of 2025, $1,337,034. March of 2026, $1,243,144. So now let's think about expectations. Let's compare the average hoped for price on the part of sellers compared to what they actually got on average in the same month. So what we can see from these numbers, if we remember what the original list price was, for Santa Clara County, reality missed expectations by 2.6% to the tune of $20,520. So on average, in the month of March in 2026, sellers were getting about $20,520 below what their hoped for number was. In San Jose, they actually got higher. So the expectation was $1,546,000, and it was actually $1,592,000, a 0.5% notch above what they hoped for on average. So they ended up making $46,181 on average more than their expectations. In Morgan Hill, expectations were $1.6 million. Reality was $1.4 million on average. That's a 0.9%, Yes, a 0.9% drop from the same time last year, but resulted in $236,925 below expectations on average for sellers in March of 2026. In Gilroy, again, below expectations, and to the tune of $227,143 below what expectations were in March of 2026. So aside from San Jose, the average transaction had sellers earning or getting paid some amount below what their expected price was, what their hoped for original list price was. So, and remember, the sales price that I'm quoting here when we talk about average sales prices isn't original list price. It's what the list price was at the time the home was purchased, right? So, and we've got a number here that'll give a little bit more information on that as well. Did I just confuse everyone? I hope I didn't. Okay. I see we've got a couple of more folks in the stream. Welcome to it. Feel free to ask any questions if you like. Next, we're going to talk about percent over or under asking price. And again, when comparing this to what the sales price was, it's what it was listed at as the time the buyer made the offer. So this is a great way to look into, we've looked into the psychology of the seller, of what their hopes are. This is a way to look into the psychology of the buyer. How much above price were they willing to offer based on the price they were looking at the time they saw it? So if the seller reduced their price at some point, we're not taking that into account. We're taking that into account. We're just going with what the sales price was at the time the offer was made. So this isn't based on original list price, so it doesn't end up bloating or diminishing what this number represents. Okay, it ends up being the reality in the moment the offer was made. Now in Santa Clara County, comparing year over year, we can see it's actually down a net 1.5%. So last year is 106.6%, which basically means buyers were willing to pay 6.6% over asking price at that time. Now it's gone down, but it's still a lot higher than I would have expected it to be when I was projecting numbers a few months ago. We stand at 105.1%, so 5.1% above asking price on average. And before we proceed, let's understand the implications of this number. You're not going to offer above asking price if there aren't other buyers. So clearly we're in a situation where homes are getting multiple offers, and in the process of navigating that, buyers are offering over asking price, right? Because if there was no competition, why would you offer higher than asking price? So this gives you some insight into the fact that there are still markets in Santa Clara County where multiple offers are happening. Not all, but they're out there. Next, in San Jose, it's down a net 1.1%. It was 105.7% last year in March of 2025. In March of 2026, it's down to 104.6, meaning on average, buyers are paying 4.6% over asking price. In Morgan Hill, it's down 1.6%. Basically, it's people are tending to pay asking price. Last year, it was 102.1, meaning on average, buyers were paying 2.1% above asking price. Now, in March of 2026, it's 100.5, which indicates a 0.5 nugget above asking price. Again, given sample size, I would call that a wash. I would say that represents getting about asking price. And there's going to be some neighborhoods within Morgan Hill where you can pretty reliably pay below asking price. And then there's others, super desirable areas, where you're going to have to pay some amount over asking price because it'll be more competitive. There'll be more people interested in purchasing. And then finally in Gilroy, same number, interestingly enough, 101.6 last year, meaning March of 2025 saw buyers paying about 1.6% above asking price. And then this year in March of 2026, we're seeing that at 100.5, so the same number as Morgan Hill, with the same implications, right? Homes are tending to sell for about asking price. And again, in Gilroy, definitely areas where you can offer below asking price reasonably. And if you've got yourself a real estate professional who understands that market, you're going to know that as you're doing your shopping and how aggressive you can be. Okay, next, let's talk about days on market. Of course, across the board, this is up. Less so in Morgan Hill, which is kind of interesting. But in Santa Clara County overall, it was 16 days to get a home sold in March of 2025. In March of 2026, that's up to 22 days. And that's an interesting line that has gotten crossed there, right? If you see 16 days, 15 days, 14 days, those are likely artificial numbers, meaning agents typically will put into the listing, we're not going to look at offers until such and such a date and time. And that's almost always at least 2 weeks after the home's been listed. Because, and this is something that I do on a regular basis, it depends on the listing, but 9 times out of 10, I'm doing this because I want to make sure the maximum number of people get a chance to see the property before an offer gets accepted. You don't want to prematurely accept an offer that might fall short of what the home would likely get if it had time to be viewed by more people. So that gives you 2 weeks to do open houses, make sure everyone who wants to see the home gets a chance to see the home, and then you'll start entertaining offers. But once you get up to 22 days or 20 days or 30 days or 54 days, that indicates an organic selling period, meaning you didn't get a ton of offers after that 14-day to 16-day window of time that you said you weren't going to take any offers. And in Santa Clara County, we see that in all of these areas, we see that that's represented. So 38% increase from last year. March of 2025, 16 days to get a home sold. March of 2026, 22 days. In San Jose, it's up 33%, 15 days in March of 2025. March of 2026 saw it jump to 20 days. Morgan Hill, 29 days in March of 2025, 30 days in March of 2026 for a 3% increase. Again, I'd call that a wash given our sample size and the broader margin of error. Gilroy, I'd say this at least is giving an indication of the trend. Is up 93%, 28 days to get a home sold in March of 2025, 54 days to get a home sold in March of 2026. But this is a kind of a hidden thing, given the fact we also saw fewer homes selling. I'm guessing that, and also because Gilroy only had 16% increase in new home listings. Oftentimes when you see this number, your first question or your first thought shouldn't be, oh, well, wow, it's taking forever to get a home sold. If you look a little deeper, often you'll find that actually sales are up. And what's happened is homes that were listed more recently have sold quickly. And what we're seeing is buyers are buying from the well of homes that have stayed on the market much, much longer. Or we're seeing homes that were on the market for a very long time and finally reduced their price, which garnered more attention, which got them sold, right? So there's some definitely interesting ways that you can get to seeing these kinds of numbers as it relates to different communities. Okay, let's take a look at the next chunk of data here. We've stopped looking year to year, and now we're looking month to month with an eye towards understanding how we might be able to predict what we'll see in the coming months. So first, we're going to take a look at total number of active listings, and we can see here that a big ramp up from December to March, big ramp up in inventory. We can see a big ramp up last year and kind of a ramp up 2023 and 2024 was weird, but this is pretty representative historically of what we tend to see, and we tend to see that peak in April. So we would expect to continue upward, and we can see that we've already surpassed the number, right, which we covered earlier, for March in terms of total active listings. So my guess is that we're going to see total active listings continue on this trajectory and go beyond these max numbers that we saw in 2025. So for you buyers out there that are thinking, maybe I need to buy right now, if you want to talk about the maximum number of products on the market, the maximum number of homes, I would start looking in April, where you will likely see a big increase. A few things to keep in mind. The very best homes in each one of these communities is going to sell fast as they list, right? If you're someone who's going into it thinking, I want something that's a little bit deficient in some way, that needs some aesthetic upgrades or some changes that don't require me to rebuild the house, but are things I can do, then those are homes you can go in and make more aggressive offers on. But you're going to have more to choose from next month than you had this month if these numbers pan out. And I think that they will. I don't see any reason why we won't see that continuing to happen. So just keep that in mind. You as a seller, your goal should be less competition. So I think one way to do that is to have already listed. If you were to list now, at least you know that you're in a position where the amount of competition is only going to increase from here. But also keep in mind that once we get to December, that number drops way down. And I see a lot of sellers getting some advantage from being on the market, say in January and February. I've done that a few times. The numbers that you hear from the popular media or from other real estate agents is that June is the time to sell your house. June is not the time to sell your house. Statistically, homes tend to sell for the highest amount in June on average. But that doesn't mean they sold in June. That means that their escrow closed in June, which means that they listed in May or earlier and then sold in June, right? So April, May is when you would want to supposedly take advantage of this June boost in price. But it's also important to note that if you look at all the numbers, you tend to find that higher priced homes tend to list in that time frame. So that boost in average sales price is something to be more informed about. It doesn't mean that your home will get more. It simply means that more homes of a higher price are tending to go during that period of time. So just keep that in mind. I know there's a lot of hype, and I realize that what real estate agents try to do is to build a sense of urgency that you need to make this certain window. And while at certain times of the year that's absolutely true, I think, and there's some advantage to be drawn from listing at certain times of the year. I think listing in January is actually a great way to go. Don't succumb to the pressure of thinking you're missing some very profitable train by not being there in April, May, June. Just something to think about. And of course, we're making broad statements here, which are designed to be 10,000 foot views. Everything's going to be different from your home. If you have someone who really knows the markets, they can come in, do a market analysis for you, and give you an idea of, for your local market, what's going on. What are the realities? What are you facing? Because if suddenly there's tons of homes in your neighborhood, that's a whole different thing than somebody listing in an area where nobody has their home on the market, right? Okay, new listings. So, and again, I anticipate this will go up, right? And we'll see our peak. So we've already sort of tried to look in the crystal ball a little bit. So new listings. One thing I like to check on these is the kind of the trend. And we can see a pretty dramatic trend last year, where from December it just went up and up and up. We can see it did the same thing here. We even have kind of that little hump right here that does its little dance, and then slows a little bit and then just makes a huge jump. My guess is we will continue to see this, and it will feed this overall number because the numbers of homes sold are going to continue to see us just adding more inventory. So let's take a look at that number. Again, every past March is a midpoint between the low and the high. And the high tends to be in April or May. April last year, and then it dropped off a little bit. My guess is going to be that we're going to see this go up, but not dramatically. We can see a little bit of a slowdown between February and March. If you can see that the rate of increase pretty good in January to February, and then February to March, it slowed a little bit. A lot can change. If interest rates do something amazing, if something else happens amazing, definitely we could see that affect this number of homes sold. But my guess is we're going to see this increase waver again. You can see how even it slows down more last year. Wouldn't surprise me if we see the same thing to even a greater extent than this, so that instead of it being that angle, it's even a lower angle, and we end up peaking at not a high number, which would mean we just continue to accumulate more inventory, right? And the more inventory we get, the more likely the prices come down, depending on the level of demand. Next, let's talk about pending. We can see pending tends to peak in March. It peaked there. It was a peak there, but then it got beat out in May. And again, pending is a leading indicator of what we're going to see sold the following month. And as I said, if you listed in this month and in April or May, you then will see pendings going on in May and June, and then selling in June, and then that gives you your higher numbers in terms of average sales price. This is a pretty dramatic increase, but again, it tends to be the month, March tends to be the month where after that, we tend to see flatter performance or a decline in performance. And I think we'll see the same thing. I think this will go flatter this year. We had some weird things happen last year in terms of interest rates and other types of things that depressed the market a little bit. But I think we're going to see kind of a similar performance here, where this will be sort of the big increase, and then it'll go relatively flat after that. Next, let's talk about list price versus sales price. It's always interesting to me when these kind of cross each other. This is the original list price. As I said, this is expectations versus what it actually sold for. Light green is the original list price, what it originally listed for. We can see that right now, the average list price original is over what the average sales price actually was. And we can see it was the opposite last year. And in 2024, March of 2024, people were getting just about what they were asking for the home. But we have crossed over here for the month of March. And I think that what we'll see is these two staying very close to each other. And it wouldn't surprise me if we continue to see original list price and average sales price in this relationship for a while. See, look here, and you can see how the relationship stayed the same and didn't cross over until June, July. It wouldn't surprise me if we see the same thing now, where we don't see a real pivot until June, July, based on the idea that the higher level of activity and the higher level of inventory that we see in May and June will potentially make these things switch. So we can see that average sales price higher in July and June. We can see average sales price higher in June. So I think we'll see the same thing. It just depends on how big of a delta there is between these two things. And I don't think that it will be that big of a difference. So I don't think expectations are rising at any crazy level, but I don't think prices are going up much based on the amount of current buyer demand that we have. Next, we're going to look at percent of asking price just to get the trend and see where we might go. Here we are in March with, we're sort of building up. If we look at March of the past, we can see that actually we saw the big ones in February, which is a result of offers that were made in January. Again, I can't say enough that in many markets I work in, I think January is a sweet spot, because look at what these folks who sold in January, they listed their home and they got an offer in January, and then it resulted in, on average, getting 7.5% over asking price. But look at June. Homes that closed escrow in June only got 3.1%, right? So the peak tends to be a little earlier, right? There's April of 2024. So in terms of wanting to get the most over your asking price, these numbers don't indicate June, right? Because, again, the factor that I think plays into that is there are simply more higher priced homes that are selling in June than there are in other months. But anyway, so here we go. And we can see that year over year in terms of March trends, we can see that March of 2024 was higher than March of 2025, which is higher than March of 2026. So a steady decline in the amount over asking price that folks are getting for their homes. I don't know where this culminates. I'm surprised that we haven't already gotten to the point where on average we're seeing homes selling for much closer to asking price. But there it is. We're definitely seeing homes continuing to sell for over asking price, which indicates there are more than one buyer for the average sale. Next, let's talk a little bit about days on market. Again, this is just a great way to sort of visualize it over time. And we can see, just like the other one was showing a decline in percent of asking price, we are seeing an increase overall in the days on market with a peak in January, which doesn't suggest, it suggests a jump in the number of homes that got sold more than anything else. Because you're suddenly buying homes that have been sitting around longer, right? So once Christmas comes to an end, you get this. You see Christmas happening. The month of December obviously is seeing some offers coming in, and in January we start to see those escrows closing from being purchased in December, and those are homes that have just simply been on the market for longer. Next, let's talk about the number of homes that have had a price reduction in March of 2026. Santa Clara County overall, last month we saw 16% of the total inventory have a price reduction. This month, up to 23%. And in terms of year-over-year change, it's 27% higher than it was last year in terms of the number of homes that had a price reduction. In San Jose, also 16%, 26% this month, March of 2026. But that's a 61% increase from the same time last year. And Morgan Hill, 10% last month, 21% this month, which indicates a pretty big chunk of sellers decided I need to lower the price of my home to get it sold. But it's a 0% change from last year. So last year in March of 2025, it was 21%. In Gilroy, 22% last month, 27% this month, March of 2026. But it was a 41% increase from the same time last year. So overall, the changes that are happening tending to lean into price reductions. I don't think there's anything horribly surprising there. What I like to do now, this is the last data slide. If you'd like to ask any questions, I see we've got a few people poking around. If you've got any questions, any ideas, anything you want to ask about, please feel free to do so. I'm going to jump into the news stuff here in a second. But before we do that, I just want to give everyone an opportunity to ask any questions that they might have so that we can share the answers with everybody. So that whatever question you might have, I'm willing to bet there's going to be a dozen other people who are thinking the same thing. And for those folks who are going to be watching this as a replay later, then the question gets asked and then they get their answer instead of having to reach out to me privately and then no one but them gets the answer. So feel free. I'm watching and I'll continue to watch here as we go. But let's go ahead and jump into the news and see. And I'll start with that article I told you that just doesn't make any sense to me at all. Let's go into the browser. Okay, so here we are. We are on... Oh, no. I'm sorry. We're not leading with that. We're starting with the hottest housing markets from Realtor.com. I always like to look at this one primarily because you hardly ever see a California community. I can't remember the last time a California community was on here, and it tends to mostly be East Coast, but we get a couple of folks in the middle here. So we've got Massachusetts, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Connecticut, East and West, Hartford, Connecticut, Neenah, Wisconsin, Oshkosh, Neenah, Boston, Cambridge, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Appleton, Wisconsin, Ohio. So all places that are considered the hottest housing markets, with one of the primary motivators being how many viewers per property versus U.S. average. and the reason why I share these also is because if you're someone who's looking to kick off an investment experience, these are great places to start, right? If any of these communities are close enough to you that you're comfortable investing there, or if you're someone who's totally willing to embrace the idea that you'll buy a property anywhere because you're going to get it managed locally anyway, these are great places to start. Not a great place to make your decision, but a great place to start your research. What are the big industries? Who is your avatar? Right? That was I was taking a class on marketing and other stuff, and who's your avatar? Who is the person that's going to consume that podcast or buy that house or invest in that property? So it's an idea of putting yourself in the shoes of someone who would rent in that market, and statistically, who are they? Right? Because you don't want to pick some super high niche thing. You want to pick something where you're going to have the highest number of folks interested in your property, right? So given that avatar, that person, that representation of the person who's going to rent your house, what do they need to see? And then you want your house to provide that, right? Which was just a long-winded way of saying you need to do more research and find out more about those markets before you should jump into them. Okay, sorry. Next, let's talk about housing trends, again from Realtor.com. This is from April 11th. And also, just to keep you up to date, the data I shared with you in all those slides is as of April 12th. So not old data. Frequently, I've done it in the first week or two of the month, and that's fine. But just so you know that this isn't like on April 1st, I ran these numbers that have been adjusted since then. I like to scroll down to this guy right here, median listing prices. Year to date, 1.7, down 1.7. List prices for us are up 3.1. So we've almost doubled what the country at large is seeing. New listings down 2.1. New listings for us up 9% overall in the county. Active listings up 7.2%. And for us, 17%. Time on market taking 5 days longer than it did a year ago. And days on market for us is 7 days, or no. Yeah, 6 days. So a little bit less than what we're seeing nationally. Mortgage rates dropped to 6.3%. This is as of the 16th, so just a couple of days ago. We can see just on average what the numbers have been doing. I like to show this one just because then we can see the graph that gives an idea of where things have been going. We're going to look in a minute at a literally marketplace for you to shop for a loan, and these interest rates are going to be much more real to the ground. And if any of you want to talk about specific zip codes or cities, we can do that as well. So feel free to make a comment in the chat, and we can run the numbers for what average stuff is happening there. And we can even use real average home price numbers for those areas. This is the one, Redfin. San Francisco home prices jumped most in 8 years amid AI boom. And I am going to claim that this is crap. I'm sure they must have some sort of year-over-year change in median U.S. home sale price. They claim median sale price in the Bay Area metro rose 14% year-over-year in March, compared with a 1% gain. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's because they're choosing the median rather than the average. That helped San Francisco reclaim its title as the most expensive major metro to buy a home. You can see that, and obviously we're Silicon Valley, so the beneficiaries of the AI boom it's not San Francisco. It's Sunnyvale, right? It's Cupertino. It's San Jose. It's Palo Alto. It's San Francisco's there, but they're on the perimeter. They're not ground zero for this stuff. So I found that interesting that they're talking 14% when year-over-year price increases that we saw were down 2.6%. So you may be saying, well, Robert, maybe you're an idiot, which is always possible. But let's take a look at this. This is the year-over-year home value change that says 0.2% in Morgan Hill. And what did I say? Down 0.9. So they may be focusing just on single-family residentials. My numbers are single-family residentials, townhomes, and condos. So that may be something that nudges my numbers down. But are you seeing 14% anywhere? San Jose, down 4.2, down 0.1, up 0.6, up 1.1, 1.9, down 2.6 in 94043. Mountain View up 2.7. As we get up to Stanford, 2.1% increase, 2.4% increase, 3.1% increase. Down in Milpitas, down in 95134, down in 95054, down in downtown San Jose, almost across the board, except for 95112. Or no, that is a negative. That's a negative, right? Yeah. All right. Well, you say, well, Robert, maybe they really just meant San Francisco. Okay. Let's take San Francisco. Do you see 14% anywhere? I see 11.5 up here. I see 5.6. I don't see anything that would make the average 14%. Do you? Down 1.7 in Daly City, down 0.8, down 1.8, 6%, 7.9, 6.3, 3.7, 1.6, 0.8, down 0.04 or down 0.4. I'm sorry, I do not see the numbers they're talking about. And if anything, my guess would be there's 11.5 right there, right by where the Presidio is, but I don't see it. So I call bull. I call bull on Redfin. Because this just doesn't, I don't know what numbers are you, I'm sure maybe at some point they explain, but, yeah, I don't know. I just don't buy it. U.S. homeowners are remodeling instead of relocating. Yeah. And again, they're probably taking a national approach to this. But here's what I'm seeing, and I'm not sure if they're muxing some of this data. I'm seeing an awful lot of homeowners who are remodeling their home because they want to have the option to sell once it's remodeled. They're fine with it, with staying there longer, but they're looking for a convenient market time to sell, and they want their home to be ready to go. I mentioned I'm doing a lot of DIY stuff around my house. That fits absolutely into that reality. I am absolutely eyeing an exit from California. And for a guy whose livelihood is linked to a state license that I would have to no longer use and get a new one where I move, that's a big deal, right? For you, it's just find a job somewhere in that new place, move and work there, right? For me, it's not. For me, it's pass the tests and do the things and get the paper and all that. And for some people, and another interesting thing, I mentioned earlier that some of my past clients have gotten letters from the state wanting more money from them because they claim that those folks didn't leave the state when they said they did. A couple of those folks were business owners or executives at companies that relocated out of the state. And not only did the state lose all those employees, they lost all that corporate tax, right? And this isn't a new story. This has been going on for years. That giant architectural firm in LA that moved out and moved to Texas. Oil companies that are closing refineries in California and moving to other states. HP announced that they're moving out of California. HP was the very first, the first high-tech thing that made Silicon Valley was HP. And they're leaving. They're out. Rumors I hear are that Apple is once again talking about moving out of the state of California. They considered it in the early 90s and got talked into staying when they got a lot of sweetheart deals. But they still ended up moving their technical support folks to Austin. So there's that, right? At what point do you hit maximum overdrive on this and really try to react to the fact that you're losing tons of businesses? And that argument that, oh, well, hundreds of businesses are started every day in California. Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And hundreds of them fail every day in California. And the reality is I don't want to trade a 1-person startup or a 20-person startup or a 50-person startup for a thousands of employee HP. Right? They never want to talk about that number, but that's the kind of where my head goes when I hear that kind of stuff. All right, next. Let's take a minute to talk about interest rates. I like to do this because it's such a real-world rubber on the road thing, right? So let's say you want to buy an average priced home in San Jose, which would cost you about 1.6 million bucks. So you've got 20% down, which means in your bank account you have $320,000. You're going for a 30-year fixed. You have an excellent credit score. You want 0 points. Single family home is what you're looking for. Let's go ahead and refresh the rates because it's been sitting there for a little while. It shouldn't change on a Saturday morning. But here you go. Here are your options. The lowest monthly payment is $7,666 a month with $499 in fees at a rate of 5.994. Not the numbers are shocking. Someone having to pay $7,666 on a mortgage makes my head hurt. But think back when we did this just a few months ago, and we have multiple choices, right? Can you remember the not so long ago days when we would do this search and we would see one or two options with tens of thousands of dollars in fees rolled into it? So at least we've got that, but we can see all of them are in the 7,600 to 7,800 range, with this one being a little higher with 0 points. Here's higher points. But I'm also disappointed we're not seeing more options. So if we were to take this down to 1.2, notice we have a lot more options, right? So that's something to keep in mind. You're going to get more products. You're going to get more mortgage products available to you when you have a lower total sales price that you're paying for, to the tune of, and you're paying $2,000 less per month, right? Which clearly is a big deal for a lot of folks who want to trade ends meet. And one of the pieces of advice I give to my buyers is figure out what you can afford, and then reduce it, and then reduce what the amount you're willing to spend on your house. Don't max yourself out. Give yourself a buffer. And once you have that number, and once you've purchased at that price point, take the amount that you kept back, and for every month you can, put more towards principal. The earlier you do this in your buying experience of your mortgage, in those first years of your mortgage, pays huge dividends in terms of the amount you pay overall, in terms of it's just a good thing. So if you can, let's say you could afford $6,755 a month. Well, get this home that's a little bit cheaper at $1.2 million, and put $1,000 a month on principal every month, or $500 a month, some amount on principal. It is so great for you. It's hard to really fathom it, and you can do the math. There's certain calculators on the internet where you can go in and have it show you what you're saving by buying principal down at a greater rate at the front end of that loan. Because remember, your mortgage is mostly interest in those first decade of that loan. If you're reducing the principal every single month, you're just giving yourself more leverage financially. Okay, so that's that. Next, it's the shameless plug portion of the show where, and it's not so shameless, because what I'm suggesting for you is to come to my website, soldbyrobert.com, enter your address right here, and check on the value of your home. It won't ask for your email address. It won't ask for anything. It'll simply spit out what your home is worth. So let's do some random thing. Here's a place in Ohio. Let's go there. Won't ask. There it is. That is a good estimate, a good starting point for you to estimate what that home is worth. Now, you can get a report on this by adding your email address, but you don't have to. So let me suggest you do that. Now, for all of my clients who purchase a home with me, I strongly suggest they do a yearly analysis of their home. Well, what you can do is subscribe to this, and all the things I suggest you do at least once a year, this will do for you automatically every month. Every month you'll get an email telling you what your home's market value is based on its information. You'll get a home equity tool, personal customized equity tool. You'll get a home purchase options, how you could leverage off of your equity in the home. Refinance calculator, does it make sense? You'll notice that the numbers are all red here. If it makes sense for you to refinance, in other words, you'll be saving money, those numbers would be green. And in my area, if you do live in Silicon Valley, I have this directly connected to a real lender right here in Morgan Hill who can give you real loan information to achieve this goal of reducing your monthly costs. Mortgage summary, a complete summary of your current mortgage, options, an overview of some of your important options as it relates to the equity in your home. Obviously, the net worth of your home, and a home renting tool, which lets you use a slider and putting in different scenarios. Should I rent a room? Should I rent my ADU that's in the backyard? Should I move, buy a new house, and not sell my old house but rent it? You can run all those numbers here. So it's a great tool. If that interests you at all, please do it. It's all you're going to get from me. I do not spam you. This is just a tool. And for those of you who've been listening to me for a long time, you know, every year I do my tech review of the stuff I'm providing to my clients for free. This tool is awesome. I've been using HomeBot now. I think this is year 4, maybe year 5. And every year I do another search. I go out there and look for the best tool. And this one which continues to win every time. So go for it. Okay. I see we've got a few people. Thank you very much for joining me. No one's asked any questions, which is a little bit of a shocker. But if you do have any questions, ask them now. I'll be happy to run through them. We can even, if you've got interest in certain areas outside of our local markets and you want to get an idea, feel free. This tool covers the entire country. So I can look anywhere. I use this frequently with my sellers to try to give them some overviews on communities they're considering moving to. But yeah, that's about it. It looks like we don't have anything else. So I guess I'll call it there. As always, I'm honored that you're willing to spend time with me. And if you're watching this in a replay scenario where you're playing it some days after it was live streamed, please consider joining me live for the next one so that any questions that you have, and don't get me wrong, I'm totally willing to answer questions that you ask me directly after the show has streamed. But I would love to kind of force multiply this experience so that folks who are watching it live can get the benefit of the answer. So please make time to join me next time we go live so you can ask your questions during the show and we can share those answers with everyone. All right. Thanks for spending your valuable Saturday morning with me. I hope you had a great coffee experience, and I hope the data gave you some insights and some interesting ways to look at what our market's doing. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. You can find ways to do that at soldbyrobert.com. Thanks again, and I will talk to you all next time.